Revealed. How a CEO's blind date turned into an inspiring love story with a hidden, poor girl. Jessica stood at the counter, her hands frozen around a chipped mug, the deep scent of brewed coffee mixing with a hint of grease from the kitchen. She watched the familiar faces glide in and out of the diner, chatter bubbling around her like a storm threatening to break. Each customer was a momentary glimmer of hope in her eyes, yet their indifference gnawed at her like a relentless tide. At 27, her dreams felt like distant stars obscured by the cloud of bills and her father's lost job at the automotive plant. Supporting her family a weight that threatened to crush her smile was a battle she fought quietly. She had always been the bubbly waitress, known for her kindness and patience, but lately, that gentleness turned into a mask. Each smile felt more like a forced performance, an illusion to fend off the fear of being invisible. What if this diner was all she would ever be? Blinking away the doubt, Jessica poured coffee into a customer's cup, her mind racing with thoughts of overdue rent and her father's growing despair. Her heart raced not with excitement, but fear. Could she really keep this up? The thought churned in her stomach. There had to be more than waiting tables, but with every shift, that hope felt more elusive. She felt trapped, the weight of her family's expectations pressing down as reality closed in around her. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the night wore on, Marc, a tall figure in a tailored suit, entered the diner with his friends. He was on a blind date, superficially charming, with an air of confidence that filled the space. Breaking through the mundane, his laughter intertwined with Jessica's warm banter, weaving a thread of genuine connection that felt oddly liberating. For a moment, the diner faded, leaving just two souls lost in conversation. But beneath the surface, unease pooled like oil and water. Marc's laughter contrasted sharply with her worries, the echo of his privilege ringing louder each time he made her smile, often disguising the truth she kept hidden. Then, like a thunderclap, his friends arrived, and the room thickened with a palpable shift. Surprise and disdain danced across their faces as they looked at Jessica, a waitress serving them late-night coffee. She felt her cheeks heat, a flush of shame creeping in. In an instant, the carefree banter morphed into an unspoken judgment. Marc hesitated, torn between his burgeoning feelings for her and his friend's assumptions. Would he still want to sit across from her, share laughter if they knew the truth? Tension coiled tightly within Jessica as she filled their cups, each pour heavy with doubt. The kind of fears that squeezed her chest. She didn't belong to his world. Would he see her solid heart or just the waitress behind a counter? As the night deepened, the whispers of class prejudice loomed large, leaving Jess to wrestle with desperation and silent determination. She refused to let them define her. But could she withstand the fear of losing someone who made her heart race amidst the weight of her world? In a moment charged with possibility, their connection flickered precariously. She could almost sense the path diverging between them. The air thickened with uncertainty, and as Jessica's resolve tightened, the point of no return approached. Would Marc summon the courage to break free from his world, embrace what he truly wanted, or let her slip away into the shadows of the diner? Jessica stood at the edge of the moment, wrestling with her thoughts as she watched Marc interact with his friends. Their laughter seemed like a distant melody, one that she couldn't quite grasp. Her heart thumped heavily in her chest, a relentless reminder of the insecurities that gripped her. Should she engage with this world that felt foreign or retreat into the shadows of her reality? She felt small behind the counter, an anchor to the diner's grit and toil, while Marc appeared like a beacon of something promising. But she knew how brittle promises could be, especially when forged from circumstances so disparate. Drawing a deep breath, she forced herself to smile, fostering the outward cheer that had become second nature. "More coffee?" she asked, the words slipping from her mouth like an incantation, an attempt to conjure a spell that would keep her doubts at bay. "Yeah, thanks," Marc replied, his easy charm lighting up his face. For a fleeting moment, Jessica basked in his attention, feeling a spark of joy illuminate her spirit. Yet, as Marc's friends continued dismissing her presence with smirks, she felt the walls of her heart trembling. Could Marc be different? Or was he just another person who wouldn't last when faced with the weight of reality? Forcing her focus back to the task at hand, Jessica reassured herself, maintaining the facade of the cheerful waitress, only to be caught again by Marc's gaze. In that moment, a quiet determination bloomed within her. If she felt this connection so deeply, perhaps it warranted a risk. There had to be an escape from merely existing. She craved a life that didn't feel borrowed. Her hands moved automatically, pouring more coffee and gathering empty plates, but within her, a shift was taking root. Something had to change, and if it meant facing vulnerability, so be it. During a lull in the diner's chaos, she wiped down the counter, passing by Marc's booth, stealing glances. She noticed the way his shoulders relaxed when he smiled, how his laughter seemed to cut through the din like bright sunlight spilling over the horizon. There was potential in the air. It crackled with unspoken possibilities. In a daring moment of clarity, Jessica tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and summoned the strength to speak. "What is the best part of your night so far?" she asked, leaning slightly closer, allowing herself to engage. Marc looked up, surprise flashing before melting into warmth. "Definitely talking to you," he admitted, sincerity softening his features. His answer ignited something inside her, a spark of hope, but it was a flame tempered by the gravitational pull of her fears. Could their worlds weave together? As their conversation flowed, doubts ebbed and flowed within her. She fought against the tide of insecurity, realizing she had to lean into this new possibility. Here was a chance to redefine herself, a foundation to build something brave. But turmoil loomed around them like storm clouds, and the inevitable confrontation with Marc's reality cast a shadow over her budding optimism. When they finished their coffee, Marc's friends filed out, leaving him lingering at the booth. "Hey," he started, running a hand through his hair. "Do you mind if I ask you something? You seem different from everyone here." Even though his words were complimenting, tension coiled tightly in Jessica's stomach. The moment of truth hovered like a fragile bubble ready to burst. What would he think of her truth? Her breath hitched as she processed his cue, her heart a wild drumbeat echoing against her ribs. She felt as if she were at the precipice, standing over the void of unknown. It was her turn now. She had to decide what part of herself to show. Taking a deep breath, Jessica prepared to share her truth, to pull back the curtain on a life that had thus far constrained her ambitions. But just as she opened her mouth, a loud crash from the kitchen interrupted, and the opportunity slipped away along with her courage. The air in the diner thickened once more, and a moment that could have reshaped her entire existence hung suspended in uncertainty. Jessica's heart sank, knowing that this was a pivotal juncture. Would she finally reveal the depths of her struggle, or retreat behind the walls they built between their worlds? Doubt began to creep back, and as usual, the monstrous questions returned. Could vulnerability actually lead to strength? Or would it unravel everything she had just begun to build with Marc? The path forward loomed before her, uncertain and fraught with possibilities. Time seemed to stretch in that quiet moment, and Jessica's mind raced as she contemplated her next move. She couldn't let fear dictate her fate. This was a deal she had to negotiate. Understanding poured over her like a rush. But what awaited her beyond the choice, in a world where labels could shackle the heart? Jessica felt the weight of the diner's atmosphere settle more heavily around her, a palpable pressure against her skin as she wiped the counter free of remnants from the scattered plates. The crash had disrupted her moment of revelation, but instead of retreating back into her insecurities, a flicker of resilience sparked within her. She couldn't allow fear to snatch away another chance. She took a deep breath, ran her hands along the cool surface, and steeled herself against the anxiety that whispered she was unworthy of Marc's attention. With a renewed focus, she turned to Marc, who was still seated at the booth, his expression one of mild concern mixed with curiosity. She allowed herself to hold his gaze longer this time, an unspoken promise lingering between them. Vulnerability appeared less daunting when viewed through the lens of connection. Slowly, she worked to steady her pulse, reminding herself of the fierce spark he had ignited in her earlier. This was about more than just her unease. This was about claiming agency for the first time. "What did you want to ask?" she ventured, her voice steadier than she felt. This was it. Rather than waiting for him to inquire, she was taking charge of the narrative. Marc paused, studying her with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. "I wanted to know, what do you dream about? Like, what do you really want for your life?" His question landed heavily, stirring the soil of her aspirations long buried under the weight of daily survival. She thought for a moment, recalling the fleeting glimmers of hope she had entertained over the years. College, travel, art, and a life unfettered by financial worries flitted through her mind. Yet, fear always swiftly followed, a specter warning her of reality as unforgiving grasp. "I used to want to be an artist," she began, surprised by the sudden clarity of her voice. "But life, it has a way of shifting priorities, you know?" Only a tremor of disappointment colored her tone. She looked towards the kitchen, where pots clanged and the sizzle of oil filled the air. "Most days, it feels like just surviving is the goal. We get caught up in making ends meet. Why not pursue it now?" he asked, his eyes alight with genuine interest. "Just because life is tough doesn't mean you have to give up on your passions. Maybe there's a way to weave them back in?" His words washed over her, stirring quiet revolutions in her heart. Questions she had buried ignited once more. She had nurtured a dream as a child, long before the harshness of adulthood began pressing down. What would it mean to reclaim that dream? To invite artistic ambition back into her existence, even if it meant facing the fear of failure? "Maybe you're right," she replied, cautiously allowing hope to crack the wall she built. "But what if I'm not good enough?" "Good enough for what?" Marc countered, his brow crinkling with confusion before his expression softened. "You owe it to yourself to try, Jessica. Be true to what you want, not what people expect of you. Have you noticed how you light up when you talk about art?" The idea took root, burrowing deep into the soil of her subconscious. Could she really take the leap? What if his encouragement was the catalyst she needed? The pursuit of art may have seemed like a distant illusion, but what if she dared to blend it into the tapestry of her life, even in small ways? Jessica realized he wasn't just a passing distraction. He was a mirror reflecting her potential. "I've thought about it. I really miss painting," she admitted. "It would mean starting fresh, facing all those doubts again. It's terrifying." "Sure, it's scary," Marc acknowledged, his tone steady and sincere. "But it's also thrilling. It's a choice you get to make, not a sentence." They exchanged a moment of quiet understanding, where dreams hovered close enough to touch. It felt as if they were standing on the brink of something significant, the awareness shifting the ground beneath her feet. Just then, the door swung open, and in walked a few loud customers, their laughter slicing through the fragile bubble of their conversation. The atmosphere shifted again, bringing with it the familiar din of the diner. The moment of clarity felt abruptly snatched away, but Jessica remained steadfast in her thoughts. What if pursuing her art could reshape not only her identity, but also the connection growing with Marc? He had a point. She owed it to herself to step into the light, to seek fulfillment, to engage deeply with her own life. But what would happen when her dreams collided with reality, and the specter of fear reared its ugly head again? As Marc engaged the new customers, Jessica pondered her next steps, realizing that the time had come to confront the truth about her aspirations. Choices awaited, but they felt charged with the vitality of a new dawn. Marc had ignited something. Would she have the courage to nurture it? The lively chatter of the diner began to fade into the background as Jessica turned her thoughts inward, the momentum from her conversation with Marc and newfound energy surging within her. The boldness he had sparked echoed her mind, asking her to confront the most daunting question of all. Who was she beneath the weight of expectations? Each jingle of the bell above the door sliced through her contemplation, reminding her of the business-front persona she wore every day, one crafted from survival instincts rather than genuine fulfillment. Yet, in those fleeting moments with Marc, she felt fragments of her lost self resurfacing. The artist, the dreamer nestled beneath the pragmatic facade that dictated her daily routine. Looking at Marc, animatedly engaging with the boisterous newcomers, she saw someone who lived in vivid colors, unafraid of splashing outside the lines. Certainly, she could learn from that. It was a sobering thought. Did her art still hold any value if it was never expressed? What was the cost of letting fear define her? As the diner filled with laughter and clinks of silverware, she noticed her hands paused mid-motion. With every plate wiped, each surface cleaned, she'd been tethering herself to that very cycle of survival, removing any evidence of her suppressed passion. Yet now, there was a stirring core within her urging for release. Could the act of reclaiming her artistry mean redefining her entire life trajectory? The surrender was terrifying, yet the very idea also fueled a slight thrill of possibility. With a deep breath, she took stock of her surroundings. There they were, everyday patrons not knowing she was more than a waitress at a diner, an artist, a visionary, a woman with untapped potential. What if she began painting again, weaving art into her narrative once more? With the thought began a trickle of excitement intermeshed with anxiety. She had always prided herself on being practical, and this act would undoubtedly challenge that identity. The evening waned, and as her shift came to a close, Jessica found herself perched on a stool at the counter, contemplating her plans. There was a community center that had recently opened in town, offering affordable art classes. Perhaps it was time to step foot inside and unearth the artist that lay dormant within time, to pull back the veil of self-doubt that had clouded her dreams. But then another thought struck her, sharp enough to slice through her resolve. What if she did take that leap, only to flop? "Hey, Earth to Jessica!" Marc's voice broke through her spiral of anxious thoughts, grounding her in the present. She looked up to find him leaning over the counter, an open curiosity on his face. "You seem miles away. Everything okay?" "Yes, actually." The words began forming in her mind, a new type of bravery rising to the surface. "I think I want to start painting again." Marc's eyes widened with delight, the corners of his mouth lifting in encouragement. "That's incredible. When was the last time you picked up a brush?" She couldn't remember the exact moment, but the memory was there, cradled in nostalgia, a time when paint would flow through her fingers like a fluent conversation. "A long time ago," she admitted cautiously. "Then tonight's your chance to plan your first step," he enthused, leaning closer as if he was fuel for her fire. "You got to approach this like your art. It's messy, unpredictable, but think of all the possibilities. What would your first painting look like?" The vivid imagery ignited a cascade of ideas, moments unfolding in her mind from the stark canvas of her existence. As she envisioned the colors, the strokes, the freedom of expression, she realized how small yet monumental this desire was. Painting, she knew, would also transcend into her daily life, using it as a medium to reflect the person she wanted to become. But once those choices took form, would her new passion take root or collapse under the weight of her old fears? The lingering question haunted her like a specter, forcing her to confront randomness, chaos, and the very real possibility of failure or worse, indifference. "Jessica, you still here?" Marc's voice called out again, pulling her back from the edge of turmoil. "Yes." "Sorry." Just thinking her words stumbled as clarity began to meld with uncertainty. "Listen," Marc leaned in, his voice gentle yet firm. "You're the only one who could decide the direction of your journey. Trust that spark inside of you. Let it guide you." Tension coiled within her chest. She felt the weight of every risk climbing up her throat. The path ahead was obscured by uncertainty, each step forward in negotiation with her fears. But for the first time, Jessica felt a measure of strength against that uncertainty, a commitment stirring within her, a resolve to move closer to who she was meant to be. The chance of redefining herself loomed clearly on the horizon, tangibly within reach. But would she find the courage to take that step into the unknown? And then it hit her. The biggest question was not if she would paint again, but what her art would uncover about the depth of her own life, her worth, and the bond she sought to cultivate. As conversations resumed around her, the hum of the diner became her heartbeat. Possibilities cascaded like colors spilling from a paintbrush. Determined, she prepared to take charge of her destiny amidst the unknown. But the reality gnawed at her. What if this journey towards reclaiming her art uncharted not just her personal landscape, but also the connection to Marc? The moment felt ripe for exploration, yet shadowed by the terrifying prospect of failure. The specter she'd always dodged. Tonight, she was tempted to step through that threshold, to dare not just a dream, but to boldly become. Would she emerge transformed or face a confrontation with her deepest fears when the paintbrush found canvas once more? The rooster's crow heralded a brand new day, but Jessica found herself in the liminal space between sleep and consciousness, contemplating the intangible weight of her decision. The vague outlines of her dreams often faded upon waking, yet today a vivid idea lingered. A canvas, plastered with splashes of color, bold strokes, an unrefined chaos, an echo of her yearning to escape the monochrome existence she had been living. As she slipped out of bed, each step felt heavier than the last. The thought of the art classes gnawed at her, enticing yet daunting. Would she really step outside her carefully constructed reality? The voice of self-doubt, her most persistent critic, chimed relentlessly, suggesting that failure lurked just beyond the doorway. What if she stepped inside and revealed her hidden self only to find that no one cared? After a lengthy deliberation over her wardrobe, she settled on an oversized sweater that gave her a semblance of comfort, while sacrificing any opportunity to impress. Somehow, it felt emblematic of her current state, a mix between protection and invisibility. She wrapped herself in the fabric of safety. But her very first brushstroke awaited her beyond the threshold, begging to be addressed. When she finally stepped into the morning chill, the world that greeted her was alive. Colors burst forth with an urgency she hadn't noticed before, echoing her own internal call to arms. Each car that whizzed past became a reminder that life flowed outside her bubble. Did her dreams of painting blend seamlessly with her desire to step away from stagnation? After a hasty breakfast, she unfurled the crumpled flyer for the community art classes, its vibrant colors dully contrasting with her uncertainty. Staring at it, she interrogated herself once more. Why was she so paralyzed? The key to her liberation lay in that very decision. Attending the class meant engaging with the possibility of failure, stepping into her truth, and unearthing a long-buried essence of herself. A rift formed in her heart, oscillating between a wish for sameness and an insistence for the extraordinary. With a deep breath, she forced herself to acknowledge the fact that she had been penning the narrative of her life with fear. What stood in her way now wasn't only external validation, but the wall she had built within her own mind. As she approached the community center, her pulse quickened, reflecting a mix of anticipation and dread. The architecture seemed unfriendly at first glance, bland, almost functional, with lifeless bricks that didn't seem to encourage creativity. Yet, she took a moment before reaching for the handle, pausing to breathe in the clarity she sought. Should she give in to the familiar whispers of doubt or pivot toward this newfound interest? With an impulsive decision, she pushed the door open. Inside, the room hummed with a cacophony of activity. Voices melded together in an orchestra of enthusiasm. Brushes dipped into paint, laughter erupted, and the scent of turpentine became intoxicating. Here lay a world of potential waiting to be tapped. Jessica's heart raced as she spotted a cluster of easels. Overwhelmed but inspired, she stepped closer, scanning the canvases, each one a revelation of someone else's struggles, triumphs, raw edges begging to be seen. For the first time, she felt the possibility of connection, not just within an artistic practice, but as individuals sharing their humanity. But lurking beneath the exuberance, a shadow flickered within her. What if her efforts paled in comparison to those around her? The agony of inadequacy welled up inside, but this time she resolved to confront it head-on. What if she took that risk? Wouldn't a brush hold more power than the fears that had limited her for far too long? Determined, she approached a battered easel, standing alone. The actual act, the brush in her hand, colors waiting to materialize on canvas, would be more telling than the whispers of doubt that often surrounded her. She placed her bag down and inhaled deeply, her new reality stretching before her like a blank canvas. This was her arrival at the crossroads of transformation. What truth would her art reveal? What new facets of her identity were waiting to emerge from the chaos of paint? But just as she reached down to pick up a brush, a familiar voice interrupted her concentration. There was Marc, appearing as if summoned by the tumult of her thoughts. His presence sent ripples through her resolve, bringing both solace and a surge of anxiety. Did he recognize the hesitant artist lurking beneath her reassuring smiles? His presence brought another layer of complexity. You came. Marc's enthusiasm danced in the air, unwittingly igniting a mixture of exhilaration and trepidation within her. Would he nudge her closer to unveiling that hidden self? Or was he the embodiment of distractions she was trying to avoid? As pupils began to take their seats and the instructor prepared to begin, Jessica was left staring back at the brush that could redefine her narrative. Was she ready to confront the art within her, even if it meant revealing vulnerabilities she had kept hidden for far too long? In the unfolding drama of self-discovery and creative rebirth, which path would she choose now that the stage was set, and would Marc's involvement complicate or support her endeavors? Would this class be the keystone to finally unlocking her potential, or a test that challenged her very essence? Jessica's pulse quickened, a drumbeat echoing in the intimate space as she grappled with the swirl of emotions instigated by Marc's presence. With the class about to begin, she felt like an imposter, her aspirations of becoming an artist flickering like a candle in a breeze. As the instructor gestured for everyone to gather around, Jessica clutched the brush tightly, its wooden handle both a grounding element and a symbol of the liberation she sought. The instructor introduced the class with a warm familiarity, inviting participants to share their experiences with art, their expectations, and what brought them to this moment. Jessica felt a crushing weight on her chest as she listened to others speak, their phrases filled with conviction. They spoke passionately about their journeys. Some had long-standing relationships with art, while others were just beginning to explore. With each narrative, her own silence echoed more loudly. Then it was her turn. The attentive eyes bore into her, urging her to provide insight into why she was there. She hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. "I've always enjoyed painting, but it feels like a distant dream," she stammered. Her cheeks flushed, embarrassment creeping in as she sensed the skeptical glances that momentarily danced across the room. Who was she to take up space here, wielding dreams like whispers against the thunderous accomplishments around her? But Marc's reassuring nod pulled her back from the edge of self-doubt. Maybe this was her moment to craft a new narrative, one that strayed from hesitation and fear. "I'm here to rediscover that passion," she finished, heart racing, surprised by her admission. The class launched into a series of warm-up exercises, and Jessica dipped her brush into vibrant colors. Each stroke felt like a declaration, a tiny bulwark against her fears. Yet doubt loomed like an additional layer of paint, heavy and smothering, urging her to look at peers' works and measure her progress against theirs. The thought of failure rode the swell of her confidence like an undertow. As the instructor encouraged them to explore abstraction, Jessica breathed deep, allowing herself to experiment. Splashes of turquoise met sunny yellows as she let her brush foray into uncharted territories of her own invention. An inner resonance began to meld with the external chaos, and in moments of wild abandon, she could see glimpses of the artist she aspired to be. Yet, it was Marc who emerged as her unintentional mirror. As he expertly wielded his brush, a relaxed confidence radiated from him. It ignited a flame of envy within Jessica. Was she truly capable of rising alongside him in this newfound realm? Or would her insecurities draw a stark line between her and greatness, a stark contrast revealing her limitations? Halfway through the class, a stillness fell over her, necessitating confrontation. She paused, brush hovering above her canvas, and considered, what if she evaluated her work not by comparison, but through the lens of expression? With each drop of paint, she was revealing parts of herself long hidden beneath layers of self-criticism. The hesitation began to evaporate as she surveyed her canvas, now bubbling with color and emotion. The reality began to unfold. This was about more than artistry. It was a reclamation of her own sense of worth. However, pulsating beneath the vibrancy were echoes of her earlier fears. The risk of comparison and the specter of inadequacy lingered persistently, clouding the satisfaction she could derive from the act of creation. Marc approached her easel, his expression contemplative and sincere, and offered her a gentle critique. "This is beautiful. It feels raw and real. Have you thought about letting yourself go further?" His encouragement felt threatening yet uplifting, a knife that sowed seeds of both motivation and anxiety. "Further?" she murmured, absorbing his suggestion, feeling an uneasy weight on her chest. Did she dare let go of fear and venture deeper into her artistic vulnerability, or was it a step too far, a leap that risked her very foundation? The class progressed, but Jessica found herself caught in that moment, caught between the urge to push herself and the frailty of her doubts. The exhilaration of creation mingled with the discomfort of exposure, threatening to consume her as she stood, brush poised, contemplating the chasm between courage and fear. An uncomfortable realization sharpened within her. Confronting her artistry meant confronting herself in its truest form, stripped of pretense. What would happen if she invited that raw essence to emerge? But was she truly brave enough for the unveiling that awaited? The instructor called for everyone to begin wrapping up, signaling an impending conclusion that felt too hurried. Jessica's internal clock ticked louder, escalating her decision point. Would this be another layer of art in the existence she always knew, or the promise of something transcendent? As the class drew to a close, she prepared to step into a reality that could reshape her narrative but lingered precariously at the edge of her comfort zone. Could embracing her vulnerability mirror the essence of color she sought to express on canvas? In that charged moment, the threshold became more than a physical barrier. It was a manifestation of her evolving self, her determination to embrace both fear and possibility. What awaited her as she dipped the brush one last time, ready to transform yet another blank canvas, mindful that this act might just herald a new dawn? Would she embrace her creative truth or retreat into doubt once more? Jessica inhaled the sharp scent of paint mingling with the warm, flickering chatter of her classmates, her heart racing as she gripped the brush tighter. The last strokes had awakened emotions that surged within her, reflecting something profound, something raw. She let the brush glide over the canvas, the colors a dance of chaos, yet mesmerizingly beautiful. With every stroke, she whispered a gentle promise to herself. This was her moment to shed the weight of doubt, but Marc's words lingered in her mind, reverberating like an echo demanding attention. Let yourself go further. What did that even mean? What if going further exposed her to deeper vulnerabilities? The walls of her confidence felt both suffocating and exhilarating. Could she truly confront the artist hidden beneath fears? As Jessica stood before the canvas, she felt the eyes of her classmates like gentle nudges, nudging her toward authenticity. She could sense their own battles. Perhaps they, too, wrestled with shadows of self-doubt. The thought ignited a spark of empathy within her, shifting her focus inward. Jessica closed her eyes momentarily. The chaos of the outside world faded, and she meditated on her palate like a sacred altar to her feelings. Vulnerability danced in the corners of her mind, and she knew she could not leave it there like a half-finished work. She dipped her brush of bold crimson against the canvas, breaking the stillness. With it came an unexpected release, a cry for authenticity. Each stroke was swifter, milder, painstakingly exposing layers of herself once locked away. She had been so terrified of judgment, but what if the judgment lay in the hands of her own conscience? A thought began to crystallize. Could she portray what she had silenced for so long? Each brushstroke transformed into an expression not merely of color, but of her tumultuous journey. She painted shadows of childhood insecurities, bursts of recent revelations, and an undercurrent of hope. As paint bled into one another, she felt closer to a vision, a fractal of self she hardly recognized. An unexpected adrenaline surged through her, propelling her forward. It wasn't about how it compared to Marc's work or anyone else's. It was simply about her journey. The class was a communion of souls searching for truth through myriad forms of expression. As the timer signaled their final moments, Jessica decided to focus less on the completion of her piece and more on its significance, a manifesto of her inner turmoil and triumph. The instructor glided past, pausing at Jessica's easel. His expression softened, stunned. This has an energy that pulls you in. What is the story behind it? Jessica felt her heart thud against her ribcage, a mix of anticipation and fear. Did she dare speak the truth? The layers of fear began to peel back. "It's my journey," she whispered, cautiously articulating, the struggle to accept who I am within this world. "Keep pushing that boundary, Jessica. You have something really special here," he encouraged before moving on. She absorbed his words like a warming sun on a crisp morning. As the class wrapped up, Jessica was caught in a storm of conflicting emotions. She had uncovered a fragment of herself, yet she felt the heaviness of vulnerability seeping in. Would she be able to sustain this new revelation, or would it vanish like the fleeting colors on her canvas? She glanced over at Marc, who was tidying his area, a relaxed smile on his face. Did he even grasp the strength of his encouragement? The connection she felt to him morphed from envy to admiration, igniting a renewed sense of clarity. She could rise. She could face her fears head-on. Yet, the lingering question nagged at her. Could she maintain this momentum beyond the confines of the classroom? Now more than ever, she was faced with a decisive path, a challenge that could either solidify her newfound identity or cast her back into twilight. As she steps into this nebulous expanse of tomorrow, uncertainty loomed, plotting the next move in her game of self-discovery. Would she soar above the remnants of doubt, or would she find herself swallowed whole by the shadows she tried to escape? The canvas at her feet was no longer just a canvas. It had turned into a testament of a battle yet to come. Gripping her brush one last time, she prepared for the next stroke in her evolving journey of creativity and self-care. What revelations awaited her outside the studio, in a world that demanded even more vulnerability? Jessica stepped out of the studio, her heart still racing from the blend of fear and exhilaration that had permeated the air as she painted. The fluorescent lights flickered off behind her, leaving her in a warm embrace of subdued sunlight that streamed through the window. She breathed in deeply, letting the air fill her lungs as she prepared for the next chapter of her journey, a chapter that would stretch beyond canvas and paint. The world outside was bustling with a roar of life. With each step she took, Jessica felt the weight of her fears stirring against the familiar cadence of her surroundings. It was easy to slip back into self-doubt, but she rejected the urge to do so. Today marked not just the completion of another class, but the birth of something new within her. She had dared to be vulnerable in front of her peers, to expose part of her soul. The very act had sputtered life into her stagnant journey. With every encounter externalized, she was met with dashed memories of fighting through insecurities. As she crossed a park, a toddler's laughter echoed, unbridled and pure. It struck a chord within her, a reminder of her own attempts to be unapologetically joyous. It was a stark contrast to the tightly wound fears that seemed to dictate her past choices. Jessica pulled her phone from her pocket, her finger hovering over Marc's number. Contact with him opened a door into a likelihood she hadn't considered. Friendship, encouragement, or even growth through their shared experiences. But would reaching out reinforce the very insecurities she was trying to vanquish? She frowned, confusion swirling within like the brush in her hand just hours before. The battle was not just against her fears. It was against the familiar impulse to hold herself back. Before she could rationalize the moment away, she pressed call. As it rang, unease clenched her stomach. Who was she looking to for support, Marc? Or herself? Did she expect him to bail her out of overwhelming feelings? A voice cracked through the silence, grounding her thoughts. Hello. Hey, it's Jessica, she said, surprising herself with the strength of her tone. Hey, how is it going? He sounded cheerful, and that buoyed her spirit. I wanted to say thanks for what you said in class today. She licked her dry lips, searching for the right words. It made me realize I've been holding back. I want to keep pushing forward, exploring that vulnerability. Of course, vulnerability is a strength not everyone realizes they have, Marc replied warmly. He paused. If you ever want to create together, let me know. His offer left her momentarily breathless. Could collaboration reinforce her growth instead of dimming it? I'd like that, she managed, feeling something within her solidified that a sense of purpose swelled as they exchanged ideas about future projects, a venture toward artistic exploration that promised to challenge them both. With each suggestion, her anxieties melted away, replaced by a desire to dig deeper, to confront and understand the very fears that had once held her hostage. Time blazed forward, and soon they agreed to meet the next day at a local cafe. Jessica could taste the potential, her mind swirling with various concepts she could pursue together. This commitment to collaboration was an unveiling, a promise of accountability and teamwork that echoed the unity she had felt, albeit briefly, in class. Jessica's steps quickened with anticipation as she headed home, ready to prepare for what lay in store. She would have to come prepared not just with questions or ideas, but also with courage. Each new day might relent the clutches of doubt, but it would also present a new layer of challenge. What awaited her on the morrow was more than a casual meeting. It was the opportunity to step into an arena where creativity thrived and fear had no place. The question lingered tantalizingly in her mind. Would she be able to dismantle the barriers that kept her confined within the shadows, or would she be ready to break into the light? As she meticulously organized her materials, a fresh wave of determination washed over her. This was just the beginning, an opening to transform her struggles into art and her fears into fuel. She was ready to dive deeper, seeking not just connection, but liberation through creation. But what awaited her when the brush met the canvas once again? The hum of the cafe enveloped Jessica as she entered, the rich aroma of coffee mingling with the chatter of patrons. It should have been a familiar comfort, but today the place felt like a stage, and she, an actress poised to deliver a monologue. Her heart fluttered with each step toward the chosen table where Marc waited, an enticing mix of excitement and trepidation threading through her core. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of the journey ahead. This was an opportunity to express, to explore, and to expose her vulnerabilities willingly. It was also a test of her resolve to embrace the very fear she had struggled against. Jessica, over here, Marc waved, a genuine smile lighting up his features. The warmth of his greeting provided a gentle nudge, urging her forward into this uncharted territory. Hey, sorry to keep you waiting, she replied, settling into her seat, trying to mask the whirlwind of thoughts preying on her mind. No worries. I was just brainstorming some ideas, but I'd love to hear what you want to pursue, he encouraged, his enthusiasm palpable. The initial banter flitted between them, casual yet electric, and for a moment, Jessica was able to relax. But as he leaned forward, genuine interest etched on his face. The weight of unspoken fears pressed heavily against her. "I think I want to start exploring some abstract themes," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "Maybe reflecting inner conflicts, the contrast between fear and vulnerability." Marc stroked his chin thoughtfully. "That sounds incredibly rich. What if we each created pieces that resonate with our personal experiences? We could bring our stories to life." His words sent a spark through her. Here was a chance to illuminate the darkest corners of her mind through their art. But the looming doubts persisted in the back of her head. What if her story wasn't compelling enough? What if the art she created was simply mediocre? I don't know if my experiences are all that interesting," she countered, the self-doubt creeping back in. "Why would you think that? Everyone has a story worth telling. Yours is unique because it's yours. That authenticity will shine through," he urged, the earnestness in his tone tearing down the walls she had constructed. The challenge now was to confront those doubts with authenticity. She hesitated, weighing the safety of remaining guarded against the thrill of exposing her truths. As Marc continued to share his own insecurities, the pressure of being true to his art, while fearing judgment, Jessica felt the weight of her walls begin to fracture. This was not just an opportunity for collaboration. It was a shared moment of vulnerability, an unveiling of their souls through paint and canvas. "Okay," she said finally, a spark igniting within her. "I'll dig deeper. I'll bring my struggles to the canvas, no matter how uncomfortable it feels." "Brilliant. Let us challenge ourselves," he grinned, and she could see a glimmer of excitement in his eyes, the same thrill coursing through her own veins now. Together, they set about plotting their pieces, interlacing personal anecdotes, fears, and aspirations, transforming their shared journey into an artistic adventure. As different styles began to emerge, Marc's organized chaos juxtaposed with her flowing spontaneity, Jessica realized this was a relationship evolving beyond mere artistic exchange. It was a partnership where both were pushing boundaries, confronting the shadows they each harbored, and laying bare their souls. But with every stroke of inspiration came the echo of her old vulnerabilities, the reminder of past failures, casting doubt on her newfound courage. Did she truly have what it took to be vulnerable, to create something that reflected her most intimate self? As their brainstorming flourished into a crescendo of ideas, Jessica's heart raced with newfound anticipation and fear. Tomorrow would bring the reality of their words, the moment she would have to step up and commit to the truth of her experiences, to her partner, and to herself. "Do you think we'll actually follow through?" she asked suddenly, an unguarded question escaping her lips. Marc met her gaze, seriousness etched on his face. "That's the only way we'll find anything worth creating. Are you ready to face whatever comes next?" As he spoke, a profound realization settled within her. This was more than just an artistic endeavor. It was a journey of self-discovery and resilience, a collision of creativity and courage. With her determination steadily eclipsing doubt, Jessica finally felt she was on the brink of unveiling the most authentic version of herself. But as the cafe buzzed around them, a nagging thought lingered: what would happen if, in that process of unveiling, she uncovered parts of herself she still wasn't ready to confront? The stakes were higher than she had anticipated. Tomorrow would demand she reveal not just her art, but herself. Would the canvas bear her truth, or would it expose the very fear she had been fighting to overcome? The morning sunlight streamed through Jessica's window, illuminating the scattered remnants of her artistic journey. The canvas lay against the wall, a vibrant mess of colors that screamed her struggles and triumphs. It felt like a reflection of her own evolving self, a tapestry woven from shards of fear, hope, and burgeoning confidence. Today was not just another day. It represented a pivotal choice, a commitment to step into her own authenticity. She couldn't help but recall the way Marc had shown faith in her artistry, encouraging her to explore her vulnerabilities in a creative space. The taste of their collaborative vision lingered sweetly in her mind, a promise still hanging in the air, urging her to break free from the confines of self-doubt. As she moved through her morning routine, the shadows of hesitation threatened to creep back in. What if her artwork fell flat? What if the raw essence she was now prepared to share turned out to be nothing but a fragile facade? Yet, she shook those thoughts away, grounding herself in the knowledge that true artistry had little to do with the opinions of others. It was an expression of her soul that deserved to be brought to life. Jessica stepped into the community arts center with a sturdy resolve and a heart racing with anticipation. Today, with Marc by her side, she chose to embrace vulnerability, the very core of the art they were about to create. The familiar atmosphere buzzed with familiar chaos, but now it felt like a welcome home. "Ready for this?" Marc asked, his face bright with excitement, seemingly oblivious to the storms that often raged within her. "More than ever," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. With a single nod, Jessica navigated to her easel, the snippet of colors waiting to transform into a narrative, not just of struggle, but hope too. The familiar arc of anxiety tugged at her as she stood before the blank canvas. The metamorphosis from a mere waitress to a burgeoning artist flickered in her consciousness. "Let us do this together," Marc suggested, standing beside her as they opened their paint tubes, colors lining up like the possibilities before them. Jessica felt a rush of warmth. His support anchored her, providing both an external and internal reminder that she was no longer alone in this creative exploration. With the first strokes of the brush, she felt a powerful convergence of freedom and fear. Each layer, added to the canvas, became an extension of herself. She found herself delving into themes she had brushed aside: her father-esque struggle after losing his job, the chokehold of financial insecurities, and the persistent fear of being unworthy. As she created, she shared her narrative with Marc, voice trembling but growing stronger with each word. The weight of the past seemed to lightly lift from her shoulders. Every brushstroke solidified her determination, forging an emotional bond with Marc that deepened through their vulnerability. Tension that lingered within her melted away, replaced by the exhilaration of raw creation. She began to see her work through a new lens, an unveiling of self that transcended expectation. Her palette became a dynamic body that pulsed with life, each color representing a facet of her journey. "Look at that!" Marc exclaimed, enthusiasm bursting from his voice as he stepped back to admire her work. "You're really channeling something profound here." His words ignited a spark within her, propelling her forward. She didn't want to shy away. This was not merely about painting, but about asserting her existence. As the canvas filled with chaotic hues, embracing moments of light, she transformed into a conduit of her history, her laughter, her tears, and her dreams. This was no longer about comparison. It was about expression, a message woven through raw honesty. Hours blended into one another in the sweet embrace of creativity. Time ceased to exist, and in this space, Jessica unfurled her identity, echoing her understanding of what it meant to be alive amid struggle. She grew into the realization that failure was not a finality, but an avenue leading her deeper into her journey. As the class concluded, the instructor moved around, offering insights. When he reached Jessica, he paused to step back, an impressed glimmer catching his eye. "This piece, it speaks volumes. You've captured a transcendent journey, absolutely profound." The validation, long sought, washed over her like ocean waves. She could hardly breathe. Here she was, a significant presence among others, no longer confined to the singular identity of the diner waitress. The weight of the past, as she knew it, dissipated under the warmth of recognition. The shadows that once threatened to engulf her began melting away, revealing a shining clarity. This was the true meaning of artistry, laying bare the very essence of one's soul and watching it dance vibrantly upon a canvas. Choosing to embrace vulnerability awakened a fortitude that reshaped her reality. For the first time, Jessica felt embraced fully in her identity as an artist, an individual worthy of all her dreams, as she and Marc exited the studio together, excitement twinkling in their eyes. Jessica knew that her journey was just beginning. The canvas was no longer just a surface. It was a gateway into uncharted territories of self-exploration and artistic expression and identity being reborn, one stroke of paint at a time. With solid confidence rooting her footsteps, she finally dared to let her heart bloom openly. She understood that her story mattered. This connected her to Marc and to the universe of endless possibilities awaiting her. Each step she took reaffirmed the commitment to herself. She was changes incarnate, transforming passion into purpose. The world hand-painted by her imagination was waiting to take shape. You need to subscribe now to be part of this transformative journey. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep these inspiring stories alive. Comment your reactions and theories about Jessica's journey. What part resonated with you the most? Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. Don't keep the inspiration to yourself. This is the moment to show your support for stories of personal triumph.